Good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, which means it's Tap Talk. And this Tap Talk is going to be just a little bit longer because I'm not joined by just one person or two people. I'm joined by three people, three of my favorite people. If I had to pick favorites, which I don't really ever have to, but I'll claim them as three of my favorite people. General Director David Hamilton from the FM Opera, Executive Director Linda Boyd, Interim Executive Director, she would want me to say, from the Fargo Moorhead Symphony Orchestra, and Executive Director Carrie Wintersteen from Theater B. So let's bring them on. Hello, David.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Linda.
Hello.
And hello, Carrie.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for joining me. I have you on because you three are all in a very particular spot. You are, you have declared, and in some cases have done it and have come back, that you are resigning from your positions. So let's start. I'm just going to call on you because it's hard to do it otherwise when you're not in person. David, tell us how long you've been at the opera and why you have announced your resignation.
Well, not really resignation. Let's call it a retirement.
Okay.
But let's see, I have been the artistic director since 1999 and the general director, which combines artistic and executive director, since 2006. So quite a while. And it's, it's just seems like it's the right time to move on to a new chapter in life, and also to let the organization grow with somebody new, somebody younger, somebody with different ideas. I think every arts organization benefits from some new leadership every once in a while, because you don't want things getting stale. And they always say, leave them wanting more. So I don't want to be the guy that's like, will he ever leave? So.
I just, because I use my time wisely, was watching Trevor Noah's interview on Jimmy Fallon on YouTube this morning while I was getting this ready, who also, Trevor Noah from The Daily Show, has also announced his resignation, and it's the exact same thing. Everyone in the audience was like, oh, and he said, yeah, I want that, as opposed to, will this guy never leave? So I think there is some real validity to that. Thank you, David, for that. Let's move on. Linda, tell us how long collectively, you can describe it however you want. How long have you been at the Symphony, and why are you only the interim?
Right. I started with the Symphony as executive director the first time from 1993 to 1996. I resigned at that time because my former husband and I had started a music business, recording studio and record label. Although through the years, I was contracted to do graphic design by the Symphony. So I believe I've designed every Masterworks program almost for the last 30 years. I don't know. And so I came back as executive director in 2007. I retired in the fall of 2019. And then the Symphony is still undergoing some transition, administrative transition. So I stepped back in as interim, and they're doing another executive search.
So a long time. The short answer is a long time.
You're not going to get a short answer from me.
That's all right. We have a half hour. We don't need a short answer. All right. And then finally, Carrie, how long have you been with Theater B, and why are you stepping down?
Well, I have been with Theater B since it was an idea. So Theater B is a much younger organization than either the Symphony or the opera. We've just begun our 20th season. And so I have been with the organization since the very beginning. And for the first 7 or 8 years, I worked on a volunteer basis. So I've been executive director now for 13 years out of those 20. And it's just recently become, economically feasible for that actually to be a full-time and benefited position. This is the first time in all those years. So I've been at the helm for a long time, and because the organization is much younger than the other two that are on the visit today, we are in a really unique spot in terms of organizational development and life cycle. And much like David, recognizing that, leave them wanting more, and also get out of the way when you're in a position to look for that fresh artistic leadership. That just seemed like a really good time for the organization. It's in a relatively stable place. And I am not yet at retirement age, so I am not calling it a retirement. It was really more a discovery for myself of realizing that I do have a limited number of work years left before I would retire, and thinking, is this the only thing I ever want to do in my professional life? Are there other things I might like to explore? So in many ways, a lot of things came together in terms of the organization being at a pivot point in its development. And I wanted to see if I could help lay the groundwork for the people who will enjoy the organization, work in the organization, make new things together, to be the ones who actually help drive what this next iteration of its life cycle looks like, as opposed to me saying, this is what it's supposed to look like. Now you guys live in that model. So that's part of why I'm stepping away now.
We're trying to anyway.
We're trying to.
All right.
I do admit, I knew that the process will take a while, and I really admired David for planning that process and further out, and Linda too.
Linda too. Yep.
In terms of the transition, and so now I'm recognizing that it really does take a little longer than perhaps I wanted it to last year, but that's fine. We are definitely working through the process pretty methodically now, and it's good.
Fantastic. So I'm curious to know from all three of you, because Linda did step away. Carrie announced she would step away and came back, and David has announced he's stepping away. You're sort of at these three different phases. This is just speculation, but why do you think it's been hard to make this transition? I mean, other people step away from jobs and it just gets figured out. Why has this leadership transition in the nonprofit sector in Fargo been challenging? Do you think Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, excuse me?
Well, I think it's partly because, frankly, of our pay scales. If we're going to attract people from across the country, we've got to be able to pay them a good salary to want to move here. We're not exactly the garden spot of the country. So, but I think we'll have, FM Opera has not actually advertised the position as of yet. That'll happen in January. They're working with one of the two big national consultants that does the opera field. Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking that there will be a number of applicants, and I'm really glad they're working with the consultant, because I think it will help the board not only save wasted motion, but also make the right decision for the company.
Great. Do the other two of you have any thoughts on that, or anything you're interested in sharing?
I think in some ways the opera company, and to an extent Theater B, is a little bit different from the Symphony in terms of the role of the executive. David, you really wear two hats as artistic director and administrative director. The Symphony has two parallel chiefs, Chris Zimmerman as music director, and whoever is in the executive director's seat. We're not either one's boss. The board is our boss, and we're kind of two parallel leaders. So it, I think, makes it more possible for the Symphony to fill a role that's pretty standard. It's an administrative role. You work with the music director. If you have to, and that role in an arts nonprofit is complex enough. You do a lot of different things, which is what really appeals to someone like me. I love that aspect of it. But I think if you were to add artistic direction to that, it makes it more complex
I
and
would
challenging
agree.
to find
Yeah.
that, unicorn.
Yeah. Carrie, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think there are a number of things at play. I think both Linda and David have hit the nail on the head in terms of some of the complexity around attracting people to these kinds of positions. And I think in a broad sense, there seems to be a lot of turnover in the entire nonprofit and arts sectors, right? Coming out of the pandemic, there seems to be, I think economists are talking about the Great Resignation all the time, and that is showing up in arts and culture as well as all of healthcare, other sectors. So I think it's somewhat complicated by the nature of work right now and how there's something appealing about remote work, for example, and there's something appealing about not necessarily having to take on that really broad leadership role, especially when perhaps the training up the ladder that you've done didn't necessarily make younger people think, oh yeah, that is exactly me. That's what I've been preparing for. And so the access to it the access points to it are a little bit different than they were, for example, when we started the company. I mean, we started the company because we saw a gap in the kind of repertoire we were interested in seeing. And so we thought, well, maybe we should make that. And now here we are trying to make sure that the organization outlasts its founders. And so that's just that's a tricky transition. And I think we are in that place where, because we're the founders, there's also that added sense of people looking at it and going, I don't know how I fill those shoes, right? Because
Right.
I think they have to be like founders, but that's not what needs to be next. Yeah, so that's some of the difficulty. I would also say that Theater B is a little bit unique in that we have a group artistic direction model. And that's actually a big part of the work that we're doing in this transition, is actually looking at how do we move into whatever that next phase is, and not rely so heavily on this really dedicated and talented group of essentially volunteers, right? The risk of burning them out is really high. And so I think, we're looking at this transition time as an opportunity to dig into that, about how do we really make a structure that continues to energize and excite the artists at the core without burning them out. And how do we find perhaps administrative leadership that makes that more sustainable?
So that transitions to my next question for you. And Linda, I'm going to let you go first. What opportunities do you see for the next crop of leaders? You can speak specifically to your organization or just in general in this community, because these are three really foundational organizations, despite Theater B being so much younger. So this is going to be a pretty dramatic change when you three are replaced by other people. What opportunities do you see in the community and in the arts for these younger leaders?
I think it'll be a big breath of fresh air. And I think it will bring new energy and life into and when you have an art form like opera or symphonic music that already has its roots in a couple centuries ago, to keep it fresh and relevant and compelling takes a lot of energy and a lot of imagination and creativity. And I think you as a person in the decade that I'm in, I feel like that tank's running low. I've it's the part of the job I enjoy the most. But I just think, it's like the old saying, how can we miss you if you won't go away? I think it really is time to make room for younger ideas and ways to keep it fresh. It'll be exciting because the Symphony in 5 years will have its centennial, 100th birthday.
Amazing.
So I can't wait to see what gets planned around that. And I also can't wait to know that someone else is going to do it.
Yes. Yes. David, what do you think are the opportunities for this new crop?
Well, what Linda said, but I agree that I think there's just a certain amount of youthful energy that could come from someone who's wanting to make their own mark here. And I also do believe that it's important that whoever comes here is willing to invest in this community for a number of years and not just look at it as a stepping stone to something larger. And we've made a commitment to 21st century opera every year, but there's all kinds of other possibilities that are current storytelling that are not limited to just what's new and the flavor of the month when it comes to repertoire, and new and different ways of approaching the classic canon. I mean, it's not the company's ever going to abandon Carmen and La Boheme, because people want to see it, and they should, because it's some of the greatest art ever created by humans. So I think I think taking things in new directions is a good positive step.
I would agree with you. Carrie, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think I kind of addressed it a little bit in talking about how our artistic ensemble can, take this as a new energizing activity, right? How do we, part of what we're getting at right now is that whole question of what are the mechanisms for inviting more artists to the ensemble, or at least to a producing company in a year, and how do we make sure we're taking care of people when they've already volunteered so much, and finding that balance between making sure people have the artistic agency and also, can take care of themselves and recharge and come back and really be engaged by particular kinds of stories or work or continuing education, those kinds of things that right now it gets hard to make sure everybody has opportunities for that refresh. So that's really what I'm looking for in the opportunities for this company. There's opportunity for a business-minded person to be in a really interesting industry. And then there's opportunity for potentially many more artists to be involved in making work and sharing it in the community.
Nice. So kind of my last question for you, unless you come up with anything burning you need to share with the audience, is what are the challenges that you see for the arts in the Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo community? And this is not to, go down the complainer lane, but just what are the genuine challenges that you think we face?
I think audiences returning after the pandemic, and certainly for the symphony and the opera, I think that has a lot to do with the perception of the elusive sort of under 35 demographic that we're not interesting to them at all, and how to get people off the couch and how to get new people in the door. I got my fingers crossed about the Marriage of Figaro coming up in a week and a half, but it's going to be a challenge if our ticket sales tank. It's while ticket sales, and this is something that most people have no idea about, ticket sales really can only cover 12 to 15% of company operations. I think wouldn't it be wonderful if we found some donor that would just cover all the ticket sales for the year, and we could be free for a year. I think that'd be fantastic. But that's not where we are, and so I think really, and plus, we are all in a live medium, and we need the synergy that happens between the audience and the performers to make it to make the experience. And if we don't have much number of head count in the audience, we don't get that sort of feedback loop starting.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Carrie or Linda, what do you think the challenges are? And challenges aren't always a bad thing. They're just challenges.
I think what we're looking at is lost momentum. Our season before COVID hit, the months leading up to COVID were some of our strongest ever. We weren't losing audiences. We were filling the hall, and we had great music, going, and our, young people were coming to the concert hall, old people, I felt good at my handoff point when I retired. I just thought, finally, we've pushed that rock up the hill. We're in good shape. Here we go. And it's shocking how much energy and momentum COVID just sucked away. So the amount of energy it's going to take to re-engage with people, sometimes one at a time, because like you say, people develop different habits during that time and new fears during that time. And so, yeah, as much as we'd like, we just can't take the time machine back to the fall of 2019 and, go from there. So it will take more energy into re-engagement with folks, more energy into introducing live musical performance as something people want to try. I thought it was interesting in reading about our industry and what's going on. Popular music concerts, rock concerts, pop concerts, were almost the first to come roaring back at capacity. So it's not like people don't want to engage. I think it's the more traditional art forms that are just going to have to work harder, because we still get the feedback that once somebody experiences that concert, that symphonic experience, they want to come back, even if they're not traditional music lovers. It is a great experience. It's a great product we're selling, but we're just going to have to work hard and be creative.
Yeah.
Carrie, how about for you? You're in an interesting position of having a very tiny space as opposed to trying to fill 900 seats, which is David and Linda's challenge and opportunity. You're filling like 100, right?
100. Mm-hmm.
100. So what's the challenge for your kind of art production going forward?
It was interesting. There was a really interesting story on Minnesota Public Radio yesterday about how government funding really helped keep so many organizations alive during these last few years when ticket sales dropped, anywhere from 60 to 95% for our organizations. And it pointed at some of the funding that came because Senator Klobuchar and Senator Cornyn from Texas could work together. So looking at these two theater communities that we might think of as very different, but in many ways what they have, across the board in common. And for us, the same kind of thing is really true. The article talked a lot about the tricky balance now that we find ourselves in terms of the repertoire we produce that might be attractive and popular and perhaps a little easier to take in. and the fact that for Theater B, a lot of what we point at is the ways in which the work is meant to challenge people, challenge the way you think about things, ask you to see the world a little bit differently, which can be uncomfortable. And so I think that's also an interesting challenge right now in terms of meeting the audience where it is, in terms of how they feel about going to things, and the sense of that it has to feel a little bit irresistible right now, in a way that, I mean, we've always wondered, how do we make ourselves irresistible? But now that is imperative in order to come back from this this loss and this sort of sucking of energy out of our growth. And so that's a tricky balance that I think is incumbent on all of us who are producing live work to make sure that we are staying true to our mission, but also, balancing that with how do we make sure that audiences find our work accessible.
Yeah. David, I believe you have a class to teach at 10:30. Is that correct?
I will need to log off around 10:30. Yes.
Okay. So we're going to wrap up so that you can go do your day job, because I don't want that to be a problem for you. But I want to say this on behalf of the Arts Partnership. This is 3 sets of shoes. 6 shoes, I guess, is what I started to say. 3 sets of shoes that are not unfillable. Everybody is replaceable, but these are 3 particularly amazing sets of shoes. The 3 of you have given so much time, so much energy, so much forward thinking leadership, not just to your organizations, but to the arts sector as a whole. We will be an entirely different community when you are finally and somewhat permanently replaced. And again, I look forward to working with your predecessors, but I will always miss my time with the 3 of you. You have been just incredible arts leaders in this community, in the region, just across the board. So thank you for what you have done in all your time and your care and attention to these 3 organizations, but also to the sector as a whole. And then thank you for what you have been for me. You are friends and models and mentors for me. And so I really appreciate that and wish you the very best. And I wish your organization success in filling your roles, because it is time for you to get to go do what you want to do next. And it's time for these organizations to see what new leadership looks like. It's exciting and a little bit sad all at once, but mostly it's exciting.
Thanks,
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you so much. Everybody else, we'll see you next week. Have a fantastic week and get out and support these 3 organizations and all of the rest of them. And as always, thanks to 702 Communications for sponsorship of Tap Talk. Have a great week. Bye.
Bye.